Okay, welcome back. It's time for grand finals here.
The finals.
We got Mono Red versus Sultai Delirium. We've got song as old as time, matchup as old as rhyme. Mono Red versus Delirium here.
It's that time.
And it is that time. Nothing but bars.
Nothing but bars. Straight fire, like
so
Patrick.
We've got we got Patrick on the play. Here's the first seed going into the top 8. He's crushing it all day long. Hasn't dropped a match yet. He's looking to just run it up clean, undefeated into the winner, into the trophy, basically. So
yeah.
That being said, I think that he's kind of up against a pretty tough one here.
Well, as long as Pete doesn't draw any arrows, it's fine.
Yeah, so I think that
or interaction.
I think that Pete is going to be favored in the matchup, even on the draw. Uro is a very, very important card, and especially no one drop here.
Big deal. But yeah. Eidolon is great.
Eidolon, not a normal inclusion in the match, or in the mono red deck here, so it must have been doing great work from Patrick here, as he's going to be able to trade 1 for 1, but get the shock out of the deal. So that's a pretty important trade here against the Sultai Delirium deck. We'll see how he wants to follow things up. I think he might have another copy of Eidolon of the Great Revel, and sure enough, he does.
Oh, so his hand is Lightning Strike, Bonecrusher Giant, land.
His hand's quite good. The Ramanap Ruins being the land in hand as well.
Thoughtseize in Pete's hand is a problem. So he's going to gain 1 life from this Uro.
Yeah, so certainly still a good interaction here, gaining the 3 life from the Uro. Ooh, no extra land, though, for Pete. That's a big deal. Karizev off the top for Patrick. Thinking about going to attacks here, deciding maybe against it. Nope, looks like...
Yeah, he thought about, stomping and playing Karizev, but I guess he's off the stomp for the prowess trigger.
Yeah, that seems pretty reasonable. I do, however, really want to play the Karizev.
Patrick will go to 18 here. Pete, I think, in a fair amount of trouble.
Yeah, we need to hit a land right now for sure. If we hit a land we can vote...
We did hit a swamp.
Okay, that's good. That's step 1. After we've gotten there, we're going to need to have some removal spells here, and we're going to need to start, bricking up this ground. It looks like Pete's...
This can't be good.
I mean, we do need to hit our lands, and we do need to put cards in our graveyard. I mean, the end game really here is putting an Uro into play, and it looks like we're just doing a little bit of shortcutting here. So Pete's going to go ahead and cast the Traverse the Ovenwald. He's going to get a basic out of his deck, then he's going to cast Uro. So he'll put Island into his hand.
He's taking 3 damage this turn, so he's going to go to 12. Patrick gets to stomp, untap, strike, kill him? Question mark?
I doubt.
So Stomp puts him to 13.
I mean, maybe. He's at 15 here.
Okay, he's up to 15.
Yeah, so he took 4 from the Eidolon triggers, but he gains 3 life from the Uro, so taking effective 1 damage on his turn. Uro's already gained 6 life this game. Very relevant. Obviously, the Eidolon of the Great Revel mitigating that by quite a bit, but... that 6 life does matter a lot, and he is still getting effects out of these Uros. He's drawing cards,
off the top there.
He's putting things into
play. He's going to be stomped. He's going to go to 13. Patrick go to 16. And then...
yes.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Pete goes to 3 unless Patrick goes to another bolt. He did not.
Yeah, looks like Patrick's doing that exact math right now.
Yeah.
But now, Pete is very close to being able to put an Uro into play here. An Uro is very absurd, but at 3, I mean, Uro is going to come into play, gain 3 life, and it's going to cost you 2 life to play.
I don't like this at all.
So here's the attack. We could just Lightning Strike before damage, obviously. Okay. So that is Patrick's plan. He's going to Lightning Strike before damage, that'll get the Prowess trigger. Did we miss our Vagabond trigger? Oh no, there it is. It's that strange looking little paper scrap looking guy hanging out there.
The art's actually pretty insane on that card.
Yeah, it's really it's a fun little friend drawn Vagabond there. It's quite good. All right,
so Pete drew another land. So his hand is now... He's not missing any land drops in the near future again.
Yeah, but I think we're probably just dead.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, we're at 3. We can only cast 1 spell before Eidolon kills us.
Yeah, and he can't play Uro.
And we can't play Uro, so we're not going to be able to ever cast Uro unless we have another one in our hand. And if that's true, then we're just not going to be able to gain any life. I mean, I know for a fact that Pete is only playing 1 copy of Courser of Crufix in his 75, and it's in the sideboard. So that's no good in this matchup.
It is no good.
Means that we're in pretty big trouble here from Pete's side, and I think he's going through all the options, but
and can't figure out.
Sure, he's just dead.
Yeah, I actually really liked if Patrick played Bone Crusher Giant instead of the Lightning Strike. I get it proves that your opponent's dead or whatever, but I think Bone Crusher was still the right play. I don't think there was a spell in Pete's deck that we're trying to play around there, and I think the fifth attacking body is just
really, really absurd.
Yeah.
Putting your opponent to very low so that they can't play a spell that fuels their graveyard and then get Uro back is very relevant.
But I don't
however,
think it matters because you just have 5 attackers and Uro's just one.
I think I agree for what it's worth. But regardless, we see Patrick take down Pete in the first game here. We'll see him on the play for game number 2, but back against the wall now for Pete in the finals. Let's take a look at the sideboard. He's got 1 Negate, 2 copies of Mystical Disputed, Saneful Stroke, 3 Unmoored Ego, a Courser of Crufix, 1 Languish, 1 Assassin's Trophy, 2 Damping Sphere, a Masker Girl, a Kalitas Trader of Get, and a Hostage Taker. What do you like?
From the top down, we want this Negate. We want this Courser. I'm pretty fine with this Languish. We saw a lot of creatures. I know Patrick's deck isn't all creatures, but I think the Languish is probably necessary.
I think the 4 mana
and the Kalitas
is good enough. Yeah, I like the Kalitas quite a bit as well.
You can even
you could sell me on a Massacre Girl.
Hostage Taker or Massacre Girl. There's arguments for both of those. But
you could also sell me on an Assassin's Trophy.
Yeah, there's the for sure 4 we want to bring in, and then there's our few maybes depending on what Pete's thinking about.
Yeah, I mean the 4 Thoughtseize are obviously first thing out. Mm-hmm. That card, complete air against mono red. It can often gain you a life because you Thoughtseize a Lightning Strike or whatever, but it's not worth the mana.
Yeah, it's not worth the spell.
Yeah, it's not worth you spending a mana and your opponent saving 2 mana, right? It's just not worth it. So I think those 4 are easy out. If there's anything else, I think Emrakul, that card needs to go. So that's at least a 5th card we need to be bringing in here. But let's take a look.
No Attractionist gone.
That one's a little better, I guess. But let's take a look at Patrick's deck here with mono red. He's got 3 copies of Damping Sphere, 2 copies of Searing Blood, 2 Chandra Torch of Defiance, 2 Skullcracks, 2 Goblin Rabblemaster, 3 Karizev's Expertise, and a Rampaging Ferocidon. What do you like here?
I've never seen a matchup where Rampaging Ferocidon looks better.
Yeah, Rampaging Ferocidon looks insane.
Real.
I like the Searing Bloods as well.
I do.
There's enough dorky stuff in Pete's deck between copies of Satyr Wayfinder and Jace Vryn's Prodigy that I'm happy to Searing Blood things out of the way. The Skullcracks seem necessary.
The Skullcracks seem pretty good. There's a lot of Patrick sideboards you bring in.
Yeah, I like a lot of
Masters. Yeah. You can even bring in Chandras for a more mid-gamey threat because Pete wants to bring in all these linear answers, and the Chandra's just so big.
Yeah, I really like the Chandra here. It lets you go a little bit bigger. You're playing against Sultai mid-range. You usually need to go a little bit bigger with the mono red deck.
Patrick can bring in 10 magic cards.
It's probably true.
I guess these 1 mana 2/2s can get out of our deck.
Yeah,
right?
that's kind of where I'm at. Monastery Swiftspear doesn't look great. That type of effect doesn't look great, as well as Lightning Strike just kind of looks pretty bad. Especially I assume there's Skewer the Critics in Patrick's deck. That card I think
Skewer can go.
Skewer can get out of here. Yeah, I'm not about that here. The Lightning Strikes don't seem particularly good. Play a more board centered aggressive style here from Patrick because the burn spells just look hideous against cards like Uro.
Yeah, so bad. But that's where the Rampaging Ferocidon and Skullcracks come in. Skullcrack.
Yeah, absolutely. Skullcrack really, really good. And yeah, have you ever played an Uro and then just lost a life?
Yeah,
that sucks. That feels terrible. Yeah.
Turn 3 was lose a life. Go.
Yeah, Growth Spiral, take 1, go. I don't want to do that. That sounds miserable. All right, let's take a look here at the opening hands for the players in game number 2. Pete on the play this time. That's very important. Looks like both players kept a 7-card hand as well. We'll see how the things progress. Patrick attacks with a Monastery Swiftspear. That'll put Pete down to 19. As now we'll see him go ahead and take an untap here. See how he wants to progress. He's got a Scavenging Ooze in his hand. That's going to be one of the better cards in the matchup. We'll see if he wants to protect that and maybe get it down at a later date. Of course, Satyr Wayfinder, an excellent interim play here before your Scavenging Ooze. I think if Pete had nothing else, I was going to advocate for putting that Scavenging Ooze into play, but with the Satyr Wayfinder here, seems pretty easy to just go ahead and put that one into play and pick up your Fabled Passage. Now we have an interesting decision of whether or not we're supposed to block this Monastery Swiftspear. It gets a little awkward if our opponent ever plays Goblin Chain Whirler, which is a card that Patrick easily could have in his deck, though unsure if it is in the deck at current. I think Patrick's best play, given a look at his hand here, is likely just double Soulscar Mage on this turn. Put 3 prowess creatures into play and prepare for a flurry of spells on the upcoming turns. We'll see if Pete's going to trump a Monastery Swiftspear if Patrick just attacks with it. It's actually pretty close in my mind on whether or not you're supposed to block, and just make sure you at least are mitigating 1, maybe 2 points of damage and not losing it to a Goblin Chain Whirler. But looks like Pete saw enough higher power creatures in the last game that he's willing to keep that Satyr Wayfinder around, try and get a little greedy with it, gain a little bit more life at a later date. Ooh, Massacre Girl off the top. That's going to be really good for Pete if he can end up getting there, but awkwardly enough, he's going to need the 1 toughness creature to stay around here. He's just going to pass the turn. He's got a Nimble Obstructionist pulled to the front of his hand, maybe thinking about stifling a potential Goblin Chain Whirler trigger to end up keeping his Satyr Wayfinder alive. It looks very, very important on this board because it's the only 1 toughness creature for the Massacre Girl to be able to actually jump in front of. Here's a Nimble Obstructionist for Pete. He's just going to flash this one in. It's going to get stomped before damage. Though I'm unsure why Pete put it into his exile. I don't believe that Nimble Obstructionist should be in exile. He's going to take 6 points of damage here from the prowess creatures down to 12. He's got 2 turns he needs to buy here to be able to Massacre Girl away the board. I think he's going to be able to pretty effectively do just that. He's got a Hostage Taker hanging out in his hand and even a Scavenging Ooze as well. So Scavenging Ooze in the meantime seems very good. It's going to buy him the ability to gain quite a bit of life. In the form of 2, it's also probably going to deter Patrick's attacks here. Now we'll see Patrick untap and draw Ramunap Ruins. Pete does need to pay that island, of course, for his Scavenging Ooze. Alright, so here's a Lightning Strike getting pointed at the Scavenging Ooze, and Pete's just going to go ahead and, eat up the Nimble Obstructionist. The Scavenging Ooze will die. It'll gain a life in the process. And once again, Pete's going to be unable to block here because he has to have the 1 toughness creature in play for Massacre Girl to be able to take out all of these creatures. So it's going to be another big hit this turn from Patrick. But after that, I think that he's going to be in a relatively good position. I mean, the board's going to be completely clear. He's going to be at, I believe, 7. And 7's a high enough life total that I think you can pretty effectively try and race the mono red deck, especially with a 4/4 with Vigilance when they have very few cards in hand. So everything's going to die. Send the turn back over to Patrick. He's only got 1 copy of Rampaging Ferocidon and a Mountain in hand. Eidolon of the Great Revel off the top. That's a good draw for sure, as he's just going to play the cards in his hand. So he's going to take 1 point of damage from the Eidolon entering. Players can no longer gain life. Means that Patrick's down to 19. Abrupt Decay the draw here for Pete. Looks like he's going to Hostage Taker. He's going to take the Eidolon of the Great Revel, and then I assume he's going to Abrupt Decay this Rampaging Ferocidon. Yep, he sure enough is. And I think Pete's just never going to recast this Eidolon of the Great Revel. He obviously just doesn't want it in play ever. So, looks like Bonecrusher Giant here. 6 lands. One of them is Ramunap Ruins, so very relevant here that Pete's effective life total is only 4, means that this is a lethal Bonecrusher Giant. Traverse the Ulvenwald, the draw here for Pete, and that one's going to be really good here, I think, as he does have Delirium. Looks like Uro being pulled to the front here. For Pete, Kalitas, another consideration. I think I like the Uro a little more than the Kalitas, though they're both close. Courser, I think, my least favorite of the options by quite a large margin. Kalitas, however, is pretty good, so if he decides that, I won't be too upset. All right, we've got Uro coming in now for Pete. I assume that we are going to be casting it here. In fact, we are. This is going to gain Pete 3 life. He'll go up to 9. He'll go up to 9 because the Rampaging Froston no longer on the board, of course. Oh, and then Pete casts the Eidolon of the Great Revel. Pretty sick. This actually means that Pete's going to be able to get a nice chump block in with the Eidolon of the Great Revel on the Bone Crusher Giant. So I actually quite enjoy that. And, well, Patrick's going to take 2 points of damage for casting this Eidolon of the Great Revel here from Pete's Eidolon of the Great Revel. No attacks from Patrick. Means that Eidolon of the Great Revel... Oh, it looks like we missed an Eidolon of the Great Revel trigger here on Pete's side. Ipnu Rivulet the draw now for Pete. That one does not look super good in this matchup, that's for sure. Uro's going to get escaped. Eidolon of the Great Revels will trigger, and that'll put Pete down to 5, but then he'll go up to 8 here from the trigger, of course. Puts Pete in a very good position to basically just not cast another spell for the rest of the game. With just this Uro and the Massacre Girl in play, means that he's going to have very much lethal threats here, and they're going to be gaining him life all the while. So here's an attack for 4. We'll see if Patrick decides he wants to opt out of this Eidolon race with a double block. Of course, he'd be going to 6 now, which means he's only going to be able to cast a single spell. There was potentially a more aggressive attack here from Pete on this turn, but I think I prefer this one, and Patrick is going to make the double block. And then, sure enough, Pete says, yeah, you can keep the Eidolon of the Great Revel. Your turn. Like, I'm not going to cast another spell the entire game, and every spell that you cast is just going to 4 you, and that's going to be really, really hard for Patrick to actually deal with all of this pressure coming in from Pete. If he casts a spell, he'll take 4. That means he's forced to chump block Uro. And then, if he doesn't cast a spell, I mean, he's just going to lose because Uro's going to just win the game eventually, so... Draw for Pete. I think Pete pretty firmly has this game number 2 locked up here. I would like to see an attack with all creatures here, I think, from Pete. Pete will gain 3 life. He'll put a land into play. Patrick obviously going to chump with Eidolon of the Great Revel here, as the card's just going to kill us. So get it off the field. It's an active downside to have on Patrick's side of play right now. I really would have liked to see, at least the Hostage Taker turn sideways on this turn as well. So this is going to be Pete gaining effective 1 life here as he casts another Uro. He'll take 2 from his Eidolon up to 12 after the Uro trigger. He'll draw a card and is able to put another land into play if he so wishes. I'd be surprised if we saw him play any other spells here. I think he's so far out of reach. Patrick with 0 cards in hand means that no card off the top is going to be able to single-handedly deal with the Uro. Didn't get a look at the card. It's another copy of Eidolon of the Great Revel. I think that's fitting for this game. Worth noting that if Pete had gotten a little bit more aggressive, he would have lethal, but as is, this is a lethal attack here, and we'll see Pete take down game 2, means that we're getting a game number 3 here from the players for the finals. Game number 3, I think it's fitting.
I think it is very fitting.
Yeah.
Seeing the finals go to a 3rd game is always exciting.
Oh, yeah. I'm all about
Especially in a matchup as close as this.
Yeah, it's super close. The margins are very narrow. Pete kind of putting on a clinic there, stealing Patrick's own Eidolon of the Great Revel and killing him with it. And it's just excellent. Yeah, I'm all about that. I love it when mono red players die to their own Eidolon of the Great Revel. That's one of the things that brings me joy in life. We see the players shuffling up for the last game of the tournament here. So we'll see Patrick on play here for this third and final game. That's a big deal. Pete obviously looking for lots of early interaction, forms of fatal push, abrupt decays, followed it up with Uros. So those are the types of hands Pete's looking for.
Even Satyr Wayfinder might put up enough of a body against...
it gets to block, I mean...
Yeah, especially against something... If Pete's against a carries of it, blocks the monkey pretty well.
That's true. It does its job. Yep. And, it also, we saw that Satyr Wayfinder was so important in that last game where Pete needed the one toughness creature to actually set off the Massacre Girl chain to be able to completely wipe Patrick's board. And that was really the turn that swung the game, was Patrick had these 3 prowess creatures and he was successfully beating down with them. He got in for 6-2 turns in a row, and Pete just had to eat it like a champion to be able to end up with a one toughness creature. But, yeah, he has to do what he has to do. So we'll see. What do you think the best draws from Patrick look like in this matchup?
Well, going without saying, Eidolon.
Eidolon the Great Revel does a lot of work, especially on turn 2.
Rampaging Frostodon probably is his second best draw.
Yeah, we saw the Rampaging Frostodon last game, and it was really good. It died immediately to an Abrupt Decay as it needed to.
Yeah, if it didn't, the game was over.
Mm-hmm. Otherwise, Pete was going to be unable to gain all of that life, so... very important. Alrighty. Let's take a look at the opening hands here for both players. Hoping to see some nice keepable hands here. Looks pretty reasonable so far from Patrick.
Patrick's hand looks pretty nice.
I think it's all burn spells, right?
Is it all?
Oh, there's a Soulscar Mage.
Yeah.
Carries as expertise.
What does that
in hand
do?
for Patrick? I'm sure we'll see that one. I was gonna say, I'm sure we'll see that one get pulled up here.
Yeah, give me that.
Yeah, it's definitely here for Uro. It is 3 mana, gain control of target creature or vehicle until end of turn. Untap it gains haste until end of turn.
Oh, sick.
You may cast a card with CMC 2 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. So it's just a 3 mana act of treason.
With upside.
Yeah, with upside.
Cool.
Pete looks like he's going to have to take a mulligan here, down to 6.
All right, that's kind of a big deal.
It's
not
fine.
Super.
The actual number of cards don't matter too much. Usually Pete is going to end the game with cards in his hand, right?
Yeah.
If Pete ends the game with no cards in his hand, he probably won.
But mostly we don't want him to use resources to not stumble.
Absolutely. That's the biggest thing, is he needs to not stumble and he needs to have interaction. And this hand, this one looks a little close here at a glance. It doesn't have any early removal spells.
Fabled Passage, Breeding Pool, Murderous Rider.
I think that's an Ishkana and a Tireless Tracker.
Oh, yeah. This looks bumpy.
Yeah.
Going to 5.
Pete has to send it back. You hate to see it, but I think that is a very disciplined and correct mulligan from Pete here. It's got 2 lands. Neither of them are black. We have a black spell. That's our only form of removal. We've got Ishkana hanging out that's really never going to be online, and Tireless Tracker just isn't the card that you need to win you a game early on in this matchup. You need,
especially on the draw.
Yeah, especially on the draw. You need early interaction, and we see Patrick's hand is actually really weak to a single copy of Fatal Push here.
Oh, it is.
He only has 1 creature in his hand, and the burn spells aren't even close to adding up to the damage that he needs to be able to win the game. So if Pete has a nice 5-card hand with a Fatal Push and an Uro or something like that, he actually is in a really good spot to win.
Okay, so this hand looks very nice.
Yeah, this is the best one Pete's seen by a lot. We've got 3 removal spells, 4 lands. Excellent. I think Pete's probably going to keep 2 lands, 3 removal spells, and just hope that Patrick kept a hand that's reliant on creatures, and I think he's going to be in a pretty good spot. He could reasonably keep 3 lands, 2 removal spells. I actually think I like that one a little bit better. And yeah, it looks like Pete's got a pretty good 5-card hand here, so I actually feel okay about Pete's chances with this 5-card hand. Yeah, and I think that we're going to see a nice land here from Pete as well. Just basic Swamp allows Pete to just Fatal Push this Soulscar Mage on the first turn. It looks like he's got an even better one than that. It'll be Blooming Marsh. Lightning Strike off the top for Patrick. Adds to the burn plan, and yeah, we are fully on plan burn. I think Pete's going to say no blocks. He's got to worry about Eidolon of the Great Revel on this turn.
Patrick, disciplined, lets him just take it.
Yeah, definitely playing around Fatal Push here is Patrick, and no Fatal Push on end step from Pete. It's stunning to me.
Yeah.
I think that we needed to cast that Fatal Push. Maybe I'm mistaken and he doesn't actually have a Fatal Push in his hand, but if he did, I'm stunned.
I would imagine Pete would have cast on end step with Fatal Push. We might just be missing something.
Yeah, it could be.
So we see the
Stomp
stop
Satyr
there.
Wayfinder.
This is
now,
pretty
there's
nice.
Fatal Pushes in hand.
And
There's
there's
2 of them.
Wow. That's actually a big deal.
Yeah.
So here we're gonna see no slash.
Yeah, there's got to be a wild slash for sure before damage. Yeah. So this is gonna be 6 damage heading at Pete. He'll go down to 13 now, but he does still have those 2 copies of Fatal Push primed to take out both of these creatures here. So I think that that's going to be the turn we'll see from Pete.
He could just play another Satyr Wayfinder and push something.
That seems totally fine to me as well.
It seems like he's more scared of something like an Eidolon, and it seems to be preserving his resources, which might cost him.
Yeah, I think it's really obvious that if Patrick had Eidolon of the Great Rebel, we would have seen it on the second turn of the game.
There's
here.
Rampaging Frostodon off the top.
No land, though, I don't think.
No land, you're right.
Wild Slash, your Satyr Wayfinder will respond with Fatal Push your Soulscar Mage, and then an attack for 2 here.
Smack. An Urvo was found by Pete.
Uro's really important
here. Missing that land and not having this Frost on for this Uro is a big
deal. Very, very important. He's also missing the land to be able to carry Zev's... Yeah, to be able to carry Zev's expertise. And now we see Opulent Palace. Pete not willing to deploy the Uro on this turn because he wants to hold up the Fatal Push for the Swift Spear. Here's an attack.
Smack.
Pete's going to Fatal Push it.
Yeah, that's going to have
Patrick's just going to have to say go here. He's just on burn. And with Uro in hand for Pete, I think he's going to pull ahead here. Which is insane. Excellent mulligan decisions here.
Oh, what is this?
Is this an escape Uro?
Kalidas?
Oh, it's escaped Uro. Oh, my lord.
We missed that.
Yeah, so he's going to gain the 3 life. Patrick's going to end step Lightning Strike Pete down to the same life total he was at. If he draws a land, he's going to be able to active trees in the Uro plus cast like a Wild Slash or something. That's going to be an additional, 8 points of damage or something like that.
Yeah.
But that's going to leave Pete alive. And
well, I think
with a resolved Uro, if Patrick doesn't find
draw a land,
he needs
land Ferocidon.
He needs the Rampaging Ferocidon for sure.
Oh, but now Pete found the Pete doesn't have a
he's out of Fatal Pushes, unfortunately. No land Torbrand isn't it.
Torbrand's really not it.
Yeah, and with no Lightning Strike on end step also from Patrick there is very shocking to me.
Yeah, I guess he thought it was
pun intended. I mean, I think we need to cast our spells. Like, obviously, we need to burn our opponent out this game.
Obviously.
We need to untap and cast Rampaging Ferocidon to prevent the life gain, and then we have a real shot at burning our opponent out here. But our opponent's life total matters a lot, and I think that Patrick needed to assume he was going to draw a land, and if he draws a land, he's going to need to point this burn spell at Pete's face, and I'm not a fan of holding it, unfortunately. But
Pete's going all the way back up to 17 here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Pete's just done it, really. I mean, I think that this is incredibly disciplined mulliganing from Pete here. I think he's, really, acknowledged that the cards in his hand aren't the factor that he cares about. He cares about the quality of the cards in his hand, not the number. And I mean, we see that right now. I mean, even though Pete mulliganed to 5, he's playing against mono red, he still has 2 cards in his hand, right? At the end of the game. Well, suppose we're not at the end of the game yet, but I assume that this game will end with Pete having cards in his hand. And if it doesn't, he's probably going to win anyway. All right, so here's a draw for Patrick. It's a mountain. Okay. Now he's found it. So
what?
Karizev's expertise on the Uro. He's hoping to draw probably a land here off of the Uro trigger, it looks like to me, but I think he needed to deploy
Rampaging
Ferocidon here because
no, he doesn't know that there's a Replicate in Pete's hand.
That's true. There's a lot to play around.
That. Oh,
yeah. Pete's going to Replicate his own Uro here. I like this play quite a bit. It prevents the additional 2 CMC card from being played.
It prevents a draw from Patrick.
It prevents a draw, and it prevents 6 damage. I mean, let's not forget about that. Yeah. Like, it is 6 damage.
But that's exactly what Patrick needed to draw out the bait spell for this Ferocidon to... So Pete's going to untap and play another Uro. Sure.
Yeah, and then Patrick will have Ferocidon.
Patrick will be able to play Ferocidon and will start his plan of burn you from 20 again.
Absolutely. I mean, starting at 20, though, and Patrick, I believe, is at 14 because he took 6 from an Uro hit earlier.
Sounds right.
So, Patrick's life total is under duress as well. I mean, this is a 6-power attacker, right? I mean, burn you from 20 is not an effective plan in the face of a 6/6, right?
No, it's really not.
So it's going to be rough, and Pete is just at 20.
So
he's at 20. I'm pretty sure that Pete has got to be feeling good right now, right?
Yeah,
like Uro is really putting in the work that it needs to be here.
Silly.
And I mean, this is exactly the reason why we mentioned that we felt like Pete is probably ahead a little bit.
There's the Ferocidon.
Yep, here's the Ferocidon.
So with Ferocidon and
plus Torbrand, yeah, that's a real thing.
Yeah,
that's very real. You do not want to put creatures into play when that's true. Pete just attacking. Yeah, Patrick will be going down to 8 here if he doesn't block, which of course he cannot.
Yeah.
No way we can block right now. So he's going to draw the card. He'll put the land into play. Patrick certainly not blocking. He'll be down to 8 now, as I believe he's taken 2 hits from the Titan.
Yep. 20-8. The life totals have...
There's a Languish in play in hand.
Brain Maggot.
For Pete as well. Brain Maggot, yeah, it's either Lightning Strike or Torbrand. Snap takes Torbrand. Of course, Pete will lose 1 life from the Brain Maggot entering, but it's going to be rough for Patrick to come back from this one. Swiftspear, not quite it. Obviously, he's going to cast it. He'll take a point of damage when he does so. He's putting himself down to 6. Oh, no. Down to 6 now means that we just have to chump block the Uro now.
I think he had to do that, though. He had to play
It's true. There's really no good outs here. He does get an attack in.
Well, Pete's at 16, right? 17. Oh, and Languish, this game is over.
Yeah, more or less. Obviously, the Uro will only attack for 2 this turn, because it does get -4/-4.
Yeah.
Patrick gets the Torbrand back into his hand, but
Pete
he is
goes
going
back
to
get
20. There's something beautiful about ending the game at 20 against Mono Red.
The Courser?
Oh yeah, the Courser of Crewfix 2 really got the whole 9 yards here. Patrick's gonna play it out for the camera, but he's dead. And that means that Pete is going to be our Paradise champion. So congratulations, Pete, on the victory here. I suppose Patrick can cast Torbrand and block, but like...
Yeah, that's not... Yeah.
Yeah, so excellent. That's quite the show from Pete. I think very well played. Patrick picks up the cards, puts an end to Patrick's undefeated streak here. And, you hate your only loss to be in the finals, but I suppose your only loss being in the finals is all things considered not too shabby.
Not too shabby.
Well played, Pete. Excellently done. We talked about him being the Sultai guy. He really knows what's going on with the deck. We saw him play the deck excellently all day long on camera here. It was an absolute delight to watch him just run up the entire finals. I think we followed him through the entire top 8, did we not?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, we did. And I think we followed him for the last 4 rounds in a row. So it was an absolute pleasure. So